This episode is brought to you by State Farm. Checking off the boxes on your to-do list is a great feeling. And when it comes to checking off coverage, a State Farm agent can help you choose an option that's right for you. Whether you prefer talking in person, on the phone, or using the award-winning app, it's nice knowing you have help finding coverage that best fits your needs. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
Shh. Hear that? Big waves are calling. Dive into refreshment with Kona Big Wave. Tropical flavor and the taste of aloha in every drop. So crack one open and let the great taste roll in. Kona Big Wave, liquid aloha. Copyright 2025 Kona Brewing Co., St. Louis, Missouri. Mahalo for enjoying responsibly.
They're doing that with AI now.
I know.
They're using a lot of the Gen Z slang and everything. So I think it's so funny when they've got Moses. He's like, the sea has been split and people are like, oh. And he's like, I told y'all, trust the process. And I was like, oh my gosh.
Jesus has mad TikTok riz, y'all.
We are in the dumbest timeline. Hey everybody, I'm Dan McClellan.
And I'm Dan Beecher.
And you're listening to the Data Over Dogma podcast, where we increase public access to the academic study of the Bible and religion, and we combat the spread of misinformation about the same. How are things today, Dan?
Rocking and rolling. Just
Right.
just out here making the world a groovy place.
And the construction going on next door to you has settled for the evening.
Has settled for the evening, yes.
They've been bedded down for the night.
You and I have been forced to push our recordings to evening, even though you prefer afternoon, because for the foreseeable future there is building.
They're building a spaceship right next to you, or something like that. Yeah.
Something.
How high is it reaching? You've got the foundation has been poured already.
Yeah,
I assume.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's well, they're still in process of pouring. So.
Oh, okay.
It's a fascinating thing to watch. It's one of my favorite shows. I've been fascinated to see how the construction of a 6 or 7 story apartment building starts,
and then
but
stalls.
It's also very loud and whatever. Anyway. Yeah. Hey, let's do a show. Today, one of the things that we're going to talk about, first, we're going to do a What's That? Yes. And this week's What's That is a big one. It's the granddaddy of Christian theology. We're going to talk about atonement.
At-One-Ment for the initiated.
We'll get into that. Because I had a whole thing. And then towards the end of the show, we're going to talk about translation, and we're going to talk specifically about what it is, like what goes into it. Why is it? What's the process of translating a scripture?
Yeah,
because it's
many scriptures,
or
the whole
all
Bible,
the scriptures. Sure. Absolutely. So we'll get to that in the latter half of the show. But first, what's that? Here's the thing. As you said At-One-Ment. Now, I have looked at the word atonement and seen At-One-Ment and thought, that's a funny joke. At-One-Ment. And then I've also heard people say it means At-One-Ment, and I thought, okay, they're just dumb. And then today, as I'm prepping for this show, I look it up, and the etymology is that it's At-One-Ment. Like, that's the actual etymology of the word, and now I'm furious.
Yeah, it's that one was a little on the nose, but yeah, the idea is the idea of reconciliation, satisfaction, reparation of a breach or an injury or something like that. Reconciliation meaning to re-sit down with. Mm-hmm. So yeah, the idea of atonement is that bringing back together and repairing of that breach. So Yeah, I always, when, we come from the same religious tradition wherein that is a popular way to explain atonement. And I, too, when I first started hearing that, was like, yeah, that's not true.
And that can't be right.
Yeah,
I know a lot about language. I've studied language. That's just never how it works. Oh, it is? Okay, fine.
Screw you for judging me. That's a deep cut. I don't know if anybody is going to know where that comes from.
No, are you going to give a hint or not?
That comes from a comedy album.
Okay.
That's it. That's just a hint.
That's the hint. All right.
At the end of the show, if either of us remembers,
which will not happen for sure, but don't worry. Go to the YouTube comment section, or if you're a patron, go to the comment section of this on Patreon, and maybe someone will have come up with it.
Yes.
Or you can at least ask the question, remind us to explain it, and we'll pop on. I'll make Dan pop on and explain it. Anyway, back to atonement, or the At-One-Ment.
Yes.
What do maybe we should start by just talking about what it
where
means.
It's coming.
I don't know. Where does it come from? Because
it's a translation of mainly a Hebrew word, but also there's a related Greek word. But because you have in like the King James version, you have atonement seat, and you have all these other words related to atonement. And let me see, King James version. And they shall eat those things wherewith the atonement was made, to consecrate and to sanctify them. But a stranger shall not eat thereof, because they are holy. So, like, atonement is a word that we find in the Hebrew Bible, and there it's based on a verbal root kafar, which can mean, in one of the what's called a stem, to smear with pitch.
Oh, okay.
So the ark of the Noah's Ark, what he does to the outside of it is kafar it with pitch, in order to make it waterproof.
Right.
Ish.
Pitch is like asphalt or
tar,
or tar,
something
tar,
like that.
Yeah.
But there's another stem, the PL, where it is used to mean something like appease or make amends, put in a state of, and the PL is what's called the factative stem, where it means to put something into the state of being X. So put in the state of being smear with pitch. So, but the idea seems to be to cover over breaches, to seal up.
Right.
The
not make sticky.
No, not make sticky. But that by figurative extension, it has to do with repairing these breaches.
Right.
And so the idea seems to be that it is a way for humanity to reestablish, to be reconciled with deity through these offerings and all that kind of stuff. And there's a lot that goes into how in ancient Israel and Judah, they understood the nature of this breach, the mechanism for its repair, and that whole conceptual framework that makes up what they would have understood as atonement. Now, they don't really talk that much about atonement in the theology of the Hebrew Bible, but once we get to the New Testament, we have, I think, 2 verses that use a word that could be translated atonement.
Okay.
One of them
2 is not many.
Well, yeah, and it depends on your translation as well. So we have hilasterion in Romans 3:25. And that's translated in the King James Version, propitiation, and atonement in the NRSV, UE, and a lot of other translations. But the idea is the place of atonement.
Okay.
And then I think we have in Hebrews 2:17, what is the word that we have there? We have hilaskomai, which means to pardon or be propitious. So reconciliation is how the King James Version translates it, atonement in the NRSV UE. So they're kind of somewhat related in the Greek, but the idea of atonement is really a framework for understanding this reconciliation that is achieved, that in the New Testament is achieved by Jesus. And
Right.
I think this is one of the reasons it's critical to understand that the Bible is not univocal. And within cognitive linguistics, we talk a lot about metaphor theory because most language is metaphorical. There's an argument to make that all language is metaphorical, but in a general sense, most language is metaphorical because what we're generally doing is trying to communicate in the most efficient and effective way possible. And a lot of times we're trying to communicate about things that are rather abstract. And so
Right.
we commonly use more concrete metaphors as analogies in order to communicate more efficiently and effectively about abstract things.
Yeah.
So we can plot or map certain abstractions against more concrete schemata or schemas, if you like. And the idea there is to just take something that's a little more complex and make it a little more easy to understand. So, for instance, we talk about temperature going up and down. Temperature doesn't go up or down. It's a question of molecules vibrating more
Right.
rapidly or more slowly, but we map this notion of temperature against a thermometer, basically, and the mercury goes up or down, and the numbers go up or down, and so we talk about temperature going up or down. So that's a way.
I think one of the, it's interesting that you chose that metaphor specifically because I believe someone could correct me, but one of the guys who was originally making thermometers, was it Mr. Fahrenheit himself? I don't know, but actually flipped it from the way we think of it.
Oh, really?
He had cold numbers at the top and hot, and like it got hotter going downward.
Oh, really?
And I don't remember quite how that worked. Anyway,
That's funny.
It would have blown all of our minds. And yeah, but yeah, you're right. Like we think of north as up a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And that's just an arbitrary decision about, or maybe not entirely arbitrary, but there's no reason why north is up on the earth and south is down, other than perhaps some socio-political choices made in order to.
Well, even that relies on another image schema. Up
Right.
is good, down is bad.
Right.
Up is healthy, down is sick. Like there are all kinds of these things. And when it comes to atonement, this is a complex constellation of ideas. And so what you really want is a way to take this and say, think of it like this. And that's a way to say all this complexity, we can distill it down to something that's simple. And so that is your atonement theory. And the problem is every different author of a biblical text was also using their own theory of what was going on. And when they talk about them according to their own idiosyncratic conceptualizations. And so now we got to look at this cacophony of conceptualizations and somehow find a way to harmonize all of it. And so we have different models or theories of atonement, and usually it comes down to what do we want to emphasize and what do we want to kind of push to the back. And
I want to get very basic about sort of the concept that we're usually talking about when we say the word atonement in this context.
Okay.
Because what we're usually talking about is something along the lines of, and maybe you'll find better words than I am, but something along the lines of humans being reconciled or made at one with God through Jesus through some mechanism that has to do with Jesus.
Yeah, I think if we take as the foundation what it says about Jesus in the Nativity, you will name him Jesus because he will save his people from their sins. In what sense does Jesus save people from sins? What is the mechanism? What has sin done to us? How does that affect our relationship with God? And what does Jesus do to repair whatever has gone on there? And one probably one of the earliest ones, the one that I think is kind of explicitly made in Mark, at least in one of the more idiosyncratic conceptualizations that Mark presents, is the ransom theory.
Okay.
The Son of Man came to give his life as a ransom for many. And I think this is probably one of the earliest, because we already have the idea of ransom in not only the Hebrew Bible, but elsewhere in the New Testament. But what a lot of and redemption is associated with ransom,
but not redemption in some sort of like moral way or something, but like redemption as in literally I'm redeeming this person, this money, or this person for the money you're giving me or something. Like we're talking literal ransom.
Well,
or like that's the metaphor, is just like someone's being held hostage.
Yeah.
And then someone else pays and the hostage is released.
Yes. So to ransom means to buy back. And so the idea is that somebody is at some distance from their people, whatever the exact nature of their relationship, and they need to pay money to get them back. Now, one of the guiding frameworks for the concept of redemption in the Hebrew Bible is enslavement. Like it develops based on the post-exilic notion that the exile was God's selling their people to another nation and that other nation's gods, and then the return from exile was God's redemption, buying back their slaves from the other nation. So we were sold to the other nation, and now we're being redeemed. God has paid the ransom so that we can come back and we can be enslaved to the benevolent master. So you see this in Deutero-Isaiah quite explicitly, that they were sold into slavery. I'm buying them back, not manumitting them, but buying them back from the wicked slave master so that they can serve the benevolent slave master. And we see this in the New Testament as well. Paul talks about this a lot as well, that you were bought with a price and you have become enslaved to Jesus. And he repeatedly identifies himself as a slave of Jesus. And so the ransom theory, while when people talk about it today, they generally kind of elide the enslavement dimension of it. But the idea is that Jesus' death paid the ransom. And one interesting thing to point out is that some early Christians seem to think that and so instead of exile, it's sin or Satan. And so Jesus paid, and Satan said, "Thank you, here's your change." In other words, the ransom was paid to Satan, to the devil. And so the devil was like, "Here are your people back."
Yeah, this stems from this idea that somehow the devil was the god, was in charge of the world and somehow owned humanity in some way, right?
Yeah.
Is that sort of the idea?
Yeah, you have the devil as the god of this world in some sense in different parts of the Bible, and as kind of the master of sin and all that. When you fall into sin and you are subject to death, you are basically subject to the devil. And so if you extrapolate out the logical end of this framework, it's like, so God is like, here, you're going to be born so that you can be enslaved to the devil, and then I'm gonna redeem this coupon later on. So go be with the devil for a while, and this was challenged by a lot of folks who were like, "Hey, do we really want to suggest that Satan has that much power, and that this is a transaction?" Between Jesus and Satan, where Jesus is like, "Here is what I owe you," and the devil is like, "Thank you very much." There were folks who were like, that's dumb. Yeah. And the Gregory of Nyssa apparently used the metaphor of a divine bait and switch.
Yeah.
Where Jesus's humanity was the bait to deceive Satan so that he could be paid back. So
it's almost the idea of, and I think we'll encounter this a lot as we talk about this, the concepts of redemption or of atonement. But it's like it's like only the divine could actually redeem humans, but somehow I think I also was looking at a little bit from Gregory of Nyssa, and the explanation that I read about was basically just that sort of Jesus sneaks divinity into into Satan's realm, and it's like the bait and switch is Satan thinks he's getting the best of the mortals, and then Jesus is like, psych, I'm actually divine, I'm out. And
bit of a Trojan horse.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, oh no, don't take me, gotcha.
You released all of the other humans for nothing, idiot.
Makes me think of, do you remember the Steven Seagal movie? I want to say, was it Under Siege, where he was on the train?
No, Under Siege was on the...
No, that's on the submarine. Yeah, what was it where he was... The guy was he was on the train. Oh, gosh. I can't remember what it is, but there's a porter who is like, one of the goofy sidekicks for Steven Seagal in the movie. And at the end, he's got a gun, and the bad guy confronts him, and he's like, what's in your pocket? He's like, I don't have anything in my pocket. Step your ass! And then pulls out his gun and shoots him.
Oh, man. Now, you just gave this episode a PG-13 rating. I hope you're satisfied. I hope you're happy.
I'd like to think that's kind of the lowest common denominator of our show, but
yeah.
Hey, everybody, I don't know about you, but I've had an incredibly busy summer. And between busy schedules and other plans, sometimes all I've got is a couple of minutes for eating lunch and dinner. Factor helps me eat smarter with tasty chef-prepped meals that are dietitian approved and delivered right to my door. And now with more than 65 weekly meals made for how I live and what I like to eat, I've got even more ways to fit in a real meal, and a delicious one, wherever the day happens to take me.
Yeah, and we're talking variety here, people. There is so much to choose from, and you get to choose. You just go in, once you've signed up, you go in, you select what meal options you want for the week, including premium seafood choices like salmon and shrimp at no extra cost. It is delightful. Global flavors. These were all designed by chefs, and they're ready so quickly. You can support your wellness goals. You can work toward a happier, healthier life, and just make it easy on yourself.
Yeah, I love these meals. Recently had smoked Gouda chicken, which was delicious.
Yeah,
anyway,
love that one.
Eat smart at factormeals.com/dogma50off and use code dogma50off to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. That's code dogma50off at factormeals.com for 50% off plus free shipping. Get delicious, ready-to-eat meals delivered with Factor.
Hi, friends. Before I got my Brooklyn bedding mattress, I thought my mattress was fine. It was the same mattress I had been using for literally over 25 years, and I didn't have any real problems with it. But the time had come. It was a good time to look into a new mattress, and I went to brooklynbedding.com, and my partner and I selected the mattress that we thought would work best for us, and it has been a dream. We got the one that was nice and soft. It feels like we're sleeping on a cloud. Now, Dan, on the other hand, I know you know this. Dan has a back issue. He likes as firm a mattress as he can get that isn't a plank of wood. And he and his wife are thrilled with their Brooklyn Bedding mattress. Brooklyn Bedding handcrafts every single one of their mattresses in their factory in Arizona. They ship it right to you. No middlemen, no gimmicks, just good old American craftsmanship that gets you a good night's sleep. And here's the thing. You're not locked in. Brooklyn Bedding offers a 120-night comfort trial. Love it, or they'll help you return or swap it hassle-free. You cannot go wrong here. So go to brooklynbedding.com and use our promo code DOGMA at checkout and get 30% off site-wide. That offer is not available anywhere else. That's brooklynbedding.com and promo code DOGMA for 30% off site-wide. Make sure you enter our show name after checkout so that they know we sent you. brooklynbedding.com, promo code DOGMA. You know, there's nothing worse than getting burned by a high wireless bill. And here's the thing, you might not even know that your wireless bill is high. A lot of the times they want you to think that everything's normal and that your wireless should be as expensive as it is. But I gotta say, Mint Mobile has really pared it down to you're only paying for what you need. And they have literally everything you need.
With Mint Mobile, you can use your own phone with any of their plans. You can bring your own number along with your existing contacts. All the plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. So say bye-bye to your overpriced wireless plans, jaw-dropping and surprising monthly bills and unexpected overages. If I were not already using this product, it would be the product I would get.
Yeah. This year, skip breaking a sweat and breaking the bank. Get this new customer offer and your 3-month unlimited wireless plan for just $15 a month at mintmobile.com/dogma. That's mintmobile.com/dogma.
Upfront payment of $45 required, equivalent to $15 a month. Limited time new customer offer for first 3 months only. Speeds may slow above 35 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Taxes and fees extra. See Mint Mobile for details.
All right, so there's the ransom view, and that was actually held for quite a long time. That was kind of the theological idea of the atonement.
Yeah, I think that made an awful lot of sense to people because they were surrounded by a world where, you know, you had enslaved folks who would get sold and bought back. Like it was in the air enough that it made it a very cognitively cheap, efficient way to communicate about this. Okay. And this is a period when most Christians are probably not as philosophically sophisticated. And a lot of these other theories start to develop as philosophical and theological sophistication begins to ramp up.
Sure.
And so particularly in the medieval and Reformation period. So I think the ransom theory was probably just one of the easier things for everybody to gain some purchase on, get a grip on. And then we move on to what do you have on your list? You said you found 5 different frameworks.
Yeah.
Okay.
I read a bunch of things, but the framework that worked well for me, there was an article on Medium by a guy named Andrew Springer, and it seemed like a good way of looking at it. Anyway, so the next thing he has is the medieval view, Christ as substitute, as written by Anselm of Canterbury.
I think that there's another one that I think we should talk about, which is a slight variation. Well, it's the Anselmian one, I think is related, called Christus Victor. And I think that name is something that was given much later to this idea. But it's related to the ransom theory, and the idea is basically that it's kind of leaning into the notion that Jesus got one over on Satan. This is Christ as victor over the powers of sin and death and the devil. And so this is all about him just enabling humanity to participate in the divine life because he was the one who won the gold.
Well, I had seen the this Christus Victor idea, but the article that I was looking at had it and as sort of this Swedish theologian talking about it in the 1930s. You're saying it's an older idea than that.
Well, I think he tries to make the case that this is a better way to frame the theory as it was understood by
the ransom theory.
Yeah, by folks like Irenaeus and Athanasius. So I think he's saying we shouldn't call them ransomists or whatever. We should say it's a little closer to this, since they were talking about this idea of Jesus's victory over sin and death. So because these theories, a lot of times it's not like they were consciously saying, I'm a proponent of the ransom theory back in, the 4th century CE. I think it's how we characterize what they're doing up until much more recently. So yeah, whether or not they would have distinguished the ransom theory from the Christus Victor theory, I don't know we can say for sure. But that's one of the models that has been proposed for how to understand those early theories.
Okay. Let's get on to sort of substitutionary theory, which is the one that comes out of St. Anselm of Canterbury and maybe other sources.
Yes. So this is 11th century. I think served as, he was the Archbishop of Canterbury from 1093 to 1109 when he died.
Okay.
But I have seen it referred to as the satisfaction theory. And so I think the idea is that Jesus backhands you with a glove and demands satisfaction from you.
Sir,
and
I will have satisfaction.
I demand satisfaction. And the idea here is that Jesus' death satisfies the demands of God's justice. So if you want to look at it legalistically, or in some way human sin has offended his sensitivities, they are repaired, they're satisfied by Jesus' death. And then and this relates to the next theory that comes up once we get into the Reformation. But
right. But
it seems
just because I'm going to be very open and honest with all of our listeners. Having done quite a bit of reading about this throughout my life, but also just in preparation for this segment, I have never felt like I understood what the hell we're talking about. Like, I've never felt like I had a decent understanding of there's this sense that something is owed, or there is a debt to be paid. And I don't know what that means in terms of sin, because to my mind, the greatest sins are things like murder or whatever, and that is a sin against another person. Mm-hmm. So I very much understand, if I steal something from you, I have created a disparity between you and me. And so somehow there is a debt there. And maybe, because I've hurt you more than just the thing that I took, it's a greater debt than just, if I take $20 from you, but you needed that $20 for a thing, like the whole thing. I understand a debt that I owe you. Uh-huh. If I kill someone, I understand that that some reciprocity makes sense between me and that person's family, or that person themselves, even though they're dead. I don't know, but this is so much bigger than that. Yeah. This is a thing between us and God, and I still really struggle to understand what that is, and where. And is there a framework in the Bible that helps us understand this, or is this all post-biblical discussion?
I think you certainly have different ideas about what sin does to people socially.
Sure.
But I think what you've probably got is a way to try to offload the problem to something that is transcendent, and to say, this is God's telling us this. This is not our understanding of of how we can get along best as a society. This is God telling us this, and obviously, ultimately, it is just people speaking on behalf of God, people coming up with their own ways to do this. But then, once you get into the Persian period, and you've got the problem of evil is becoming a big question, and people are wondering, why do good things happen to bad people and bad things happen to good people? And then you develop this notion that all of the accounts will be squared in the afterlife, whether that means reward or punishment. Then you're kind of creating this alternative reality where all of this is ultimately being controlled, and where all of this will ultimately be resolved. And so I think it's that creation of these alternate realities that is kind of the fulcrum of all of this. We've created these realities. We're passing them on to the rising generations. They've got to deal with them in ever-changing circumstances. And cumulatively, they're just adding more and more to these alternate realities. And I think people just start thinking in more general terms about how to unify all of this, how to make this all make sense in a way that works out best for the people who are doing what we determine they're supposed to be doing. Because in pre-exilic Israel, and even to some degree with like the Sadducees and in Job and things like that, it's kind of like, hey, to quote the great poet, shit happens, and you're serving God so that you'll have good things happen to you in life, maybe, and then that's it, and then that's the end of things.
Yeah.
But once we project everything into these alternate realities, I think that makes for a larger scene and a larger backdrop, and now we've got to fill that with we've got to unify that with everything that's going on here. And yeah, people have to just, they're reading the scriptures and they're interpreting it in ways that make the text of the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament meaningful and useful to them. And they're just coming up with different frameworks for unifying it all. And
I guess there's this idea that somehow our sin separates us from God. Right.
Yeah.
And so somehow we need something, some mechanism to at-one us with God. And but okay. So the substitutionary, we need to get back into. We're not going to get through this thing if we're not careful. The substitutionary.
It was
idea,
always taking a bigger bite than we could chew.
Yeah,
But,
we could just go on and on forever.
Yeah.
And neither of us is a theologian, so that's a tricky thing as well. But the substitutionary thing is basically somehow, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's something like Jesus was able to satisfy in some way the debt that our sin accumulated to God.
Yeah, whether you understand it in a legalistic sense or in an honor-shame sense, that's one way people understand it as well. What Jesus does is Jesus is the substitute for what we owed. So Jesus steps in and takes the place of the debt that we cannot pay, which leads us in the Reformation period to penal substitution theory. And
oh my gosh, my brain immediately jumps to penile? No, penal. P-E-N-A-L.
My brain jumps to what league you've been playing in? California Penal. So that's Major League. But this is the idea that it is the punishment that Jesus takes on in place of us, satisfying God's wrath and justice. So it's not just separation. It's not just like God's like, oh, I miss those guys. It's that God is like, I'm coming for you because of what you did, and Jesus steps in the way. and takes the punishment. Penal substitution is the idea.
Sort of like the oldest child who doesn't let dad beat his younger siblings or something.
Something like that. Yes. And they have, we talked about Romans 3:25. God presented Christ as a propitiation, which could be the idea of the substitute for the target of God's wrath. He was pierced for our transgressions, is Isaiah 53, according to a Christological interpretation of that passage that originally had nothing to do with any future Messiah. But all these are ways to interpret these different passages that are coming at the idea from different angles. And I think if we could go back and actually talk to the authors of Isaiah or of Mark or of Romans or whatever, and be like, all right, tell me how you would answer these questions. Like, they would not come up with the theories that we come up with. It would be entirely different. You don't think they'd
be Calvinists? And,
no, because ultimately what folks like Calvin were doing is looking at the whole of the text and trying to unify it all. And of course, you have to give priority and preference to certain passages, and you have to subordinate others. But ultimately, like Paul didn't really care about any of the other things that folks were saying. Paul was going to be Paul. And you know, the pastoral epistles and Colossians and Ephesians and maybe 2 Thessalonians, they weren't even Paul. So but yeah, it would be interesting to be able to talk to those folks and be like, if you could just break it down.
Yeah.
Can you just
settle a bet for me?
Yeah. So, but penal substitution theory is very Calvinistic. Where God's wrath plays a central role in this, and
this. This now we're getting very much, rather than a sort of idea of God's honor being reconciled. It's that there is a, like you said, a legalistic idea here, where an infraction has been committed. There's a set sentence for that infraction, and rather than us having to do that, Jesus somehow stepped in. And I don't know what the mechanism is, like what Jesus. I guess it was his
the death on the cross, yeah.
But other people died on the cross and it didn't do anything. So that doesn't mean that doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Well, his death was probably amplified.
It was special. It was special.
Yes. God was like, this is going to hurt you a lot more than it's going to hurt me. And that's kind of the point. Now I'm quoting a Batman comic book.
There you go.
When Joker kills Robin, beats him to death with a crowbar, he says, this is going to hurt you a lot more than it hurts me.
Joker kills Robin?
Yeah.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, God. This is from like 89 or 90, 91, something like that. This is...
I've never read a comic book in my life.
Oh, gosh.
I know.
I'm leaving for Comic-Con tomorrow.
I'm a heretic in all of the ways, Dan. I understand that.
But we have even more.
Okay.
Wait, there's more.
Don't stop now.
Yeah. Tell them what else they get, Dan.
They get Christ as an example, as a moral influence.
Yes, the moral influence theory. I was about to say moral influencer theory, just to be fun. But
sure.
Yeah.
Jesus on his TikTok, like, hey, Christian gang.
Oh, gosh. They're doing that with AI now.
I know.
Oh, gosh. And it is so bizarre to see, the one I because they're using a lot of the Gen Z slang and everything. Uh-huh. So I think it's so funny when they've got Moses. He's like the sea has been split and people are like, oh, and he's like, I told y'all, trust the process. And I was like, oh my gosh.
Jesus has mad TikTok riz, y'all.
We are in The dumbest timeline.
Anyway, talk about the moral influence thing.
Yes, so the idea here is that Jesus' death demonstrates God's love, and this inspires humanity to repent and to live morally. So the main deliverable is this inspiration, this moral influence on humanity. So it is less about satisfying divine justice or wrath or paying the ransom, and more about offering a catalyst for the transformation of the hearts of humanity. And in a way, this is kind of taking what some biblical authors suggested the purpose of the law was, and saying that's the purpose of Jesus's atonement.
Can I ask a question about that?
No.
Oh,
yes, you may.
I guess my question is just when? Can it kick in ever, please? Because I would very much like for, look, I'm very happy for Jesus' atonement to mean that everyone sort of takes his example and acts nice to each other.
Yeah.
Just anytime, just kick it in.
Yeah.
Anytime now.
Yes.
Would be great.
These days, you have, we are just a couple of days removed from another one of those. Oh shoot. Now I don't even remember the organization. Jubilee. One of the Jubilee things with Mehdi Hassan, where you had people who were up there like, yes, I'm a fascist. I'm 100%.
Yeah.
And they're like, I'm Catholic. And oh my! And then you've got fired, and now he's raising money on some GoFundMe Lite place, and a bunch of people are like, we got to support our own, and it's like, your own what?
Yeah, if that's your own, you're in trouble.
Yeah, and so
that's bad.
To the degree that the fourth commandment means you are a representative of Jesus and don't do stupid stuff while you are bearing Jesus' name, there's an awful lot of commandment breaking going on these days. So that's probably a strike against the moral influence theory.
Yeah,
I mean, we had the WWJD bracelets for a while, but that didn't stick.
Didn't seem didn't seem to move the needle much on that.
No.
All right. Well, and that kind of brings us up to today. Those are sort of the main theories that we've had thus far. It seems. I'm still a little mystified. I'm going to be honest. You haven't gotten me there. So just in terms of like understanding. Well, I mean, I understand what each of these theories is. I just don't understand what we're talking about.
Well, we didn't even get to governmental theory.
Ooh.
Or the scapegoat theory.
Okay.
Which is the idea, it's the mimetic theory. René Girard, based on his anthropological insights, the idea is that Christ's death exposes and breaks the cycle of scapegoating violence in human societies. So as the innocent victim, he reveals the injustice of scapegoating and reconciles.
Isn't he literally, in this case, a scapegoat?
The scapegoat? I didn't come up with the theory. I'm just I'm just pointing out there are other theories out there.
Okay.
So,
okay. Well,
and then the governmental theory is basically like there's this bureaucracy of righteousness and morality, and this is just part of the process. So
I admit to being quite mystified by theologies in general. They all feel like they break down fairly quickly and easily when pressed even slightly.
Yeah. Which I think it makes a lot of the folks out there who are so convinced that their particular approach is right. It's like once you get into atonement theory, you see very quickly that you've got a lot of ground to cover.
Yeah.
And it's not looking good.
Okay. Well, as is our tradition here on the show, I feel that we have not made anything better, nor have we explicated this in any real way that's helpful. So
we've muddied the water, and now we're going to scurry away.
Now we scurry away. So let's move on to our next segment, Lost in Translation.
Hey, everybody, we know that life gets busy. I've got a big family. I've got a lot of work going on. I've got hobbies that I enjoy. The last thing I want to do is have to worry about house cleaning all the time. Something that you can do to take that off of your schedule to lighten your load a bit is signing up for HomeAglow.
Yeah, HomeAglow is this great service. It just connects you up with local workers in your area who want to clean your house. I have used their service, and it was great. My house cleaner came over. She cleaned beautifully. She did a fantastic job. I explained what I wanted. She did it. It's all done through the web, and was super duper easy for me to set up. And now I can just call on her whenever I want to. It's the easiest thing in the world. They make it super simple.
And HomeAglow has what they call their Forever Clean membership. You sign up for the membership, and this is going to save you $30 an hour on your future cleanings. You're going to be able to book unlimited cleanings starting at $19 an hour, backed by HomeAglow's happiness guarantee. And when you sign up for the Forever Clean membership, we can get you a special discount.
Absolutely. Take home cleaning off your plate this summer by using HomeAglow. Head to homeaglow.com/dogma to get your first 3 hours of cleaning for only $19. That's HomeAglow.com/dogma.
On WhatsApp, no one can see or hear your personal messages. Whether it's a voice call, message, or sending a password. To WhatsApp, it's all just this. So whether you're sharing the streaming password in the family chat or trading those late-night voice messages that could basically become a podcast, your personal messages stay between you, your friends, and your family. No one else. Not even us. WhatsApp. Message privately with everyone.
And today's Lost in Translation, we're literally talking about translation. And I think a lot of the problems with people getting in trouble with the Bible happens when people believe that their interpretation isn't an interpretation, but is rather actually just what the Bible says.
Yeah.
And that's, your book talks about this about at length about the Bible doesn't say anything. But that's a tricky thing to explain in a short amount of time. But what we're talking about is just sort of the Bible is, the authors of the Bible were trying to transmit meaning to other people in the form of written language. And not everybody, and so there's the problem of just that I write words and then you read them in the same language, and and there's still plenty of opportunity for us not to understand each other just from that.
Oh yeah, I mean nobody's ever been on a family text chain where they understood what everybody else was saying at all times.
Right.
I've got family in-laws that I know I'm not going to understand their text. Like I hear the ding and I see the face come up and I'm like, here we go. I don't know what they're going to say. There's even people who, people go to therapy to figure out how to learn to communicate in ways that their spouse can understand. Not that I've done that, but spoiler, I have done that.
Right, exactly.
Yes. So, but a lot of people don't understand the role of translation in what's going on, because there are a bunch of decisions that have been made before you even get to a Bible that you can open and read.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to briefly go over some of the process of translating the Bible. And I was talking with you, Dan, prior to hitting record about how we could talk about what I was involved in, which is translating the Bible into other languages that either don't have a lot of translations or don't have any translations at all of the Bible. But we also have Bible translations into languages that have a lot of translations. And, the one that most of us, if you're listening to this show, have some grasp of is English.
Right.
And, we've got hundreds and hundreds of translations of the Bible into English. And the process of creating one of those is very different most of the time from the process of creating a Bible into. I said Neva Clay when I was giving you an example, and you were like, Neva what?
What?
Which is a language that also, I think probably more commonly in previous generations was referred to as Chalupi, but that's
Nice.
spoken. That's spoken.
I like
in,
both of those names. Those are both. Those are my two favorite languages, and they're the same language.
When you get to say names of languages like that, it's a fun job. But that's a language that's spoken in some of the grasslands of the area around Uruguay and Argentina and Paraguay. So, but anyway, there are a bunch of decisions that have to be made before even a translator decides how to translate a passage as well, because they need a source text. And so the first step for if you're going to sit down and say, I'm going to translate the Bible, which oddly enough is something that I have done. It's a long process, but when you sit down to do that, you need a source text. And there are a handful of different ways that you can go about that. If you want to do as little work as possible, then you can just go find yourself a critical edition of the Hebrew Bible and a critical edition of the Greek New Testament. And then you have what is widely considered an acceptable base text, an acceptable source text.
Maybe tell me, what is a critical edition? What separates a critical edition from a non-critical? One of them's like, I don't like what you're wearing.
So a critical edition means that it's the kind of edition that a scholar could use to translate the Bible, but it's generally going to contain what's called a critical apparatus. And this is where editors will go through and they will provide significant variant readings in the footnotes. And some people who don't know a ton about the Bible, if they flip through a critical edition and see that there are variant readings in virtually every verse of the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament, that might spook them a little bit.
Yeah.
But these critical editions, there are also two different kinds of critical editions. We can broadly distinguish what's called an eclectic edition from a diplomatic edition. And so the Hebrew Bible, mostly scholars use a diplomatic edition. And what that means is it is reproducing a single ancient manuscript. And then you just deal with it from there. Right. And so for the Hebrew Bible, the Leningrad Codex from about 1008 CE is generally considered your starting point. And so a critical edition of the Hebrew Bible, like the BHS or the something like that, is going to be reproducing the text of the Leningrad Codex exactly.
I feel like a lot of our listeners were just sort of had their minds blown by the fact that it was 1,000 years after Jesus, and that's the earliest text, or that's the text that people are using. Like that's and
that's the earliest complete manuscript of the entire Hebrew Bible in Hebrew.
Right. And the Hebrew Bible, and if that's the case, then we're talking it's almost 2,000 years after when some of that Hebrew Bible was meant to have been written, right?
Very small fragments of it, but yeah, it's pretty recent. And so scholars who are going to translate the Hebrew Bible are going to compare what they're seeing to earlier editions. So one of the main things they're going to compare to is what's known as the Septuagint, the ancient Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, because we have manuscripts that contain pretty much the entire Hebrew Bible in Greek translation that go back to around 325, 375, 400 CE. So we can move back 6-ish centuries if we just look in a Greek translation.
But it's already been translated.
Right. And so there, when you see differences between the Leningrad Codex and the Septuagint, you've got to figure, well, is this because the translator may be interpreting it in a weird way?
Right.
Or if it's a result of their source text reading differently in Hebrew. And so you have this continuum from what they call translator exegesis all the way to variant source text and what is most likely there. And there are a lot of times when people will say, I think the Septuagint had a different Hebrew source text, and I think that Hebrew source text is probably more original than what is in the Leningrad Codex. And so you might decide, I'm going to translate what's in the Septuagint rather than what's in the Leningrad Codex. Or you might go to the Dead Sea Scrolls, which are even earlier than most manuscripts of the Septuagint, and point to some things in there. And there are a lot of places where scholars are in widespread agreement. This preserves an earlier reading than what's in the Leningrad Codex. So if you're translating the Hebrew Bible, you have to grapple with these variant readings from earlier manuscripts.
Right.
So you have to be a bit of a text critic. In fact, the Jewish Study Bible and the JPS Tanakh, so the English translation of the Hebrew Bible that is prepared by the Jewish Publication Society, as a rule, they are basing their text on the Leningrad Codex, on the traditional Masoretic text. However, there are a bunch of places where you just can't make sense of it, where the Hebrew just doesn't make sense, or we can tell that something has been lost. So even though it is a rule that they're supposed to stick with the Masoretic text, the Leningrad Codex, you find a bunch of footnotes where they're like, ew, we don't know, but the Septuagint says this. And so there is some punting to the Septuagint that takes place. And so even if you're just translating the Hebrew Bible, you have to be a bit of a text critic. And I don't think you can make your way through the entire Hebrew Bible without giving priority to a Dead Sea Scroll manuscript or a Septuagint manuscript or something like that here and there. So that's part of what goes into just getting the source text. Now,
Okay.
That's a diplomatic edition. Then you've got what's called the eclectic edition. And the eclectic edition is where you don't have a single manuscript. You're going to cobble one together. You basically go through verse by verse and decide what manuscript reading is most likely what was written here, and we're going to use that. Right. And that usually means you are cobbling together a Greek New Testament from 200 different manuscripts. And, some of those manuscripts may account for 70% of what you have. Some of those manuscripts may account for one word of the New Testament. But this is why we need to be aware of all the thousands of manuscripts that are out there. So when you get a critical edition of the Greek New Testament, this is an eclectic edition for the most part. You do have people who will translate into English, Codex Sinaiticus or something like that.
Right.
Where they will use the Septuagint as their diplomatic source. But for the most part, it is a critical edition, which is cobbled together from all these different manuscripts. And they keep coming out with new editions. The kind of most authoritative ones are the United Bible Societies, which I think they might be in their 5th edition. I'm pretty sure they are. And then you've got the Nestle Aland, which is in its 28th edition. And so every time they have gone back over the manuscripts and been like, we now think that this preposition is right, and this so you'll get little changes like that.
Right.
But if you're doing the New Testament, that's what you're translating. And that critical edition does not match any existing manuscript anywhere. So I think a lot of people would be surprised to hear that when we look at an English translation of the New Testament, that is a Frankenstein's monster of manuscripts of the New Testament.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, that's what and if you just reach for one of those to translate the New Testament, you could go all the way through and just rely on what the editors have given you. But you have a lot of folks who will go through and be like, you know what, I like this reading better over here for this particular passage. And usually, translators, they don't have to for most translations, they don't have to make a case for why they gave preference to this reading over and against that one. But if they're translating for a group, like for the United Bible Society or something like that, they usually have to provide translator notes. So if they deviate from a given critical edition of the New Testament, they've usually got to defend their decision to whatever group is overseeing their translation. So that's just getting the source text. That's before you ever set finger to key.
Right.
You have to get a source text that you're going to translate. So step one is figure out what your source text is going to be.
Yeah, it's so much more complicated than just taking, Harry Potter and figuring out how to make it Turkish. Like it's as if 200 people wrote Harry Potter and then 8,000 people rewrote it, but may have added their own thing. And it's wow, it's a lot. It's a lot.
And then you've got to get into interpreting it, and that's where most translators have a good background in biblical studies. They're aware of the controversies, at least a good number of them. They're aware of the traditional readings. They will rely on resources. Usually translators will compare, they'll have all different kinds of translations up to see how it has been done in the past. And there may be there's usually going to be one or a few that they like, that they're going to kind of give preference to. But they will also often use other translator resources, like a translator handbook or something like that. And these will be kind of like commentaries, but commentaries intended to aid specifically the translation of the Bible. So there are different groups out there that publish translator handbooks on John, on Matthew, on Obadiah, on Haggai. And so a translator will get one of those, and every verse they may or may not consult this. And usually it's going to be where they run into something sticky, where they're like, oh, well, I thought this was going this way, but I looked at these translations, they have something entirely different. What am I to make of this? And so you want to go get a sense of where the controversy lies and then how you're going to solve that, if you're responsible with what you're doing. A lot of folks will just blaze on through, but the better translations are going to seriously engage with the conversation that is out there. So, for instance, Robert Alter's translation of the Hebrew Bible is a very literary translation. He's a literary scholar, and so you've got a lot of discussion of the different options and why he's giving preference to one option over another. And he even published alongside of his translation a book called The Art of Bible Translation, where he discusses his methodology and why he answered certain concerns the way he did. Because
there are like a lot of the concerns. You could think, oh, okay, well, I just translate it word for word and then we're done. But that's the worst idea, because there are idioms and there are ideas being transmitted in a way, and they're being transmitted to people in a context that doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's it's a huge challenge. And there's a famous example of they were trying to do a translation into a First Nations group up in Canada, I think. I don't remember the name of the particular people group, but they were trying to translate Lamb of God. And these people didn't really know what a lamb was.
Right.
And I don't know that they had a word for lamb. And so the translators tried to get an understanding of how are we going to communicate this idea to this culture based on the very specific and comparatively limited kind of cultural domains that they were familiar with. And what they went with was, and I think to the degree they may have understood a lamb, they thought of it as a pet, more than something that would be slaughtered or sacrificed. And the translators decided that seal was closer to how they understood what they or closer to what they wanted them to understand.
As cute animal metaphors go, sure.
So that I don't remember. I wish I remembered when exactly this was. It was a bit ago, and what language it was. But the idea was, seal of God.
There you go.
Yeah, and there's another example of an African language, tribal language, where there was something about one's heart being full. I don't remember where the passage is. I think it's somewhere in Paul, but filling up somebody's heart or something like that. And in their culture, to have a full heart was to be greedy and selfish. You're hoarding everything for yourself, and so your heart gets fat. And so they didn't want to do that. That would have given the wrong idea. And so they actually reversed it. And they talked about your heart shriveling.
Okay.
In the translation, because that meant you were giving of yourself. You cared so much about everybody around you that you just wanted to give, and that caused your heart to shrivel.
Interesting.
So when you look into how the Bible gets translated into different cultures, into different languages, into different circumstances, it's just so fascinating what translators have to do to try to connect all these dots. And if you've never translated a text as long as the Bible, it's thousands and thousands and thousands of dots that you have to connect. And you have to try to be as thoughtful and as critical as possible with every last one of them. And it becomes phenomenally complex.
Yeah, it sounds almost infinitely complex. Like
it can be.
It's not really a thing you can do.
Yeah,
Can we just admit that you can't actually translate the Bible? It's not really possible.
Yeah, it's impossible. Like there's another school of thought that talks about how the only accurate translation would just be to reproduce the source text.
Yeah.
It's just like, run it through a copier, there you go. Because the instant that you are translating it, you're changing it, because there are no two languages that have exact isometric one-to-one matches for every possible conceptual unit.
Yeah.
It's just not possible.
We can't know. I mean, you talked about the Lamb of God thing, and you mentioned sacrifice, and I realized that my contextual context for a lamb is it's just a cute little baby sheep. And I don't even think about it being sacrificed. I might think of it being slaughtered for food, but it means something different for it to have been sacrificed in a sort of ritualistic way, and that's something that our culture has no context for.
Yeah, it's
there's so much. It's funny. When I was gearing up for this conversation, I ran a bunch of quotes through online translators. Sort of played a game of operator where I would take it, to German and then to Hebrew and then to Lithuanian and then back to English or whatever.
Yeah, to see what kind of nonsense comes out the other side.
And I wanted to do just regular things. And here's the thing: some of these now they're AI sort of run a little bit, or they're so some of them, if you put in a famous quote, it just translates it back to the famous quote. It knows the quote and just feeds that back to you. So it's like, oh, okay, you've defeated the purpose.
That's why you can't really do the Bible, because they'll just give you the King James Version or something like
right.
that.
Yeah, exactly. I tried to do it with the Bible and it just came back. I tried to do it with John 3:16 and I ran it through all these different things, and then it came back and it was just like exactly King James, John 3:16. And I was like, you liar. You're just lying now. But one of the ones that was very interesting to me, I just took the quote, the John Lennon quote, "Life is what happens when you're busy making other plans." And I did it through, I think, 3 different languages. And when it came back, it said, and I actually ran it from, one of the translations, I did it in a different translator just to make sure that it wasn't, that Google didn't catch me and just zip it back to the original.
Right. Yeah.
And what it came back as was, "Life is what happens when you make plans." And that's literally the opposite meaning.
Yeah.
But one can understand like why the idiom was missed, why the idiom of that quote, the sort of the tongue-in-cheek gesture of the quote was missed in the translating it through all these different things because a lot of care is taken. A machine doesn't know how to take that care with transmitting meaning along with language.
Yeah. There's connotation and there's denotation. And the connotation is where a lot of the nuance is, but the connotation is often where we load up our intent. And particularly with idioms and things like that, where we assume that language is just A plus B plus C, and particularly with idioms, it is A plus B equals S. And
right.
You can't really teach a machine that. You can have it experience that, and in some way that's kind of trying to replicate how humans learn language. But yeah, there's a degree to which that's just not going to work.
Yeah.
And yeah, that in the world of Bible translation, particularly in new and languages where you either only have a few translations or you don't have any translations, machine translation is a huge deal. They're trying to do machine translation, but the idea isn't just feed it into a machine and there you got your translation. It's do that and then go have experts comb through it and figure out where they have misunderstood or something like that. And you go back and forth between experts comparing the source text to the target text and then a general readership who is checking it for how readable and natural it sounds. And you would go through like multiple phases of these reviews to try to take what the machine has given you and either improve it on your own or after each cycle feed it back into the machine to get back something else. And the intent there is just to cut down the time of the translation from 10 years down to 2 years or maybe even 1 or something like that. So if time is what you're on the lookout for, machine translation is something a lot of people are trying to make work more effectively. Yeah. And
although the problem is that famously Robert Frost, I think it was, said that poetry is what's lost in translation. And I think machine translation would quintuple that effect. So there you go. I just to honor him, I actually translated I did my translation operator trick with Robert Frost's most famous poem,
The Road Less Traveled one.
The Road Not Taken. Yes.
The Road Not Taken. Yes.
Maybe I'll close us out by reading the multiply translated last stanza of his thing. Which is close to what he originally wrote, but not quite there. So the translated and then retranslated version goes, I will tell this with a sigh. Somewhere, hundreds of years from now, two roads diverged in a forest, and I chose the one less traveled by, and that changed everything. If you know the poem, you know it's wrong, but there you go. Once again, thanks so much for that. That was I think it's just good. I think the good conclusion is just the Bible is not something that we can look at as an infallible book because we don't even know what the book is.
Yeah, there's no single Bible.
Right.
There are Bibles.
Right. All right. Well, thank you so much, listeners, for checking in with us. If you'd like to become a part of making this show go and in return receive early and ad-free version of the show, potentially get the bonus content that we do every week, go to patreon.com/dataoverdogma. If you'd like to write into us, it's contact@dataoverdogmapod.com is what I'm trying to say. Thanks so much to Roger Gowdy for editing the show, especially this week, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Bye, everybody.
Data Over Dogma is a member of the Airwave Media Network. It is a production of Data Over Dogma Media, LLC, copyright 2025, all rights reserved.
Have you ever gazed in wonder at the Great Pyramid? Have you marveled at the golden face of Tutankhamun, or admired the delicate features of Queen Nefertiti? If you have, you'll probably like the History of Egypt podcast. Every week, we explore tales of this ancient culture. The History of Egypt is available wherever you get your podcasting fix. Come, let me introduce you to the world of ancient Egypt.
Hello, this is Matt from the Explorers Podcast. I want to invite you to join me on the voyages and journeys of the most famous explorers in the history of the world. These are the thrilling and captivating stories of Magellan, Shackleton, Lewis and Clark, and so many other famous and not so famous adventurers from throughout history. Go to explorerspodcast.com or just look us up on your podcast app. That's the Explorers Podcast.
Hello everyone, Takuya here.
And I'm Gabby.
And we are the hosts of History of Everything, a podcast which you can probably guess by the name is, well, it's about everything. Do you want to know why people thought potatoes were evil and would give you syphilis? Are you curious about all the stories of the terrible and stupid ways that people have kicked the bucket over the years? Do you want to hear tales about all of the different badasses of history and the lives that they had brought to life? Well, if so, then look no further. History of Everything is just the right podcast for you. It's available on Spotify, Pandora, and anywhere else that you get your podcast from. Join us for some fun and just see how weird and wacky history can be.